All right, I finally found some time for a new lab talk. Perfect. Teaching takes up too much time. I really need to find a shortcut. Oh, did I say that out loud? Anyway, let's do some intercultural communication stuff with John. What is my culture actually? All right, complaining and drinking beer because I'm Austrian. So funny, Danny. Okay, off to the virtual recording studio. John's already there. So, let's get it on the floor. Get it on the floor.
The Community Lab. Your podcast that connects professional communication research, practice, and people.
Hi, and welcome to the Community Lab. I'm Danny, producer and host of this knowledge transfer adventure, in which fellow communication scholars and I break down their research for practitioners, students, fellow scholars, and anyone fascinated by the magic of communication in professional settings and beyond. This lab talk revolves around a topic that concerns all of us, especially in a world that is more interconnected than ever before. Intercultural communication, and its little cousins, international and intergroup communication. For this endeavor, I invited Professor John Baldwin from Illinois State University. To be honest, while searching for the most suitable guest, I came across many excellent scholars working on culture and intercultural communication. However, John stood out, not only because of the breadth of his work on the topic, but also because of his remarkable ability to explain complex ideas in an engaging and accessible way. It genuinely impressed me, and I hope it will impress you too when we chat about it. In this lab talk, John explains what culture actually is, the differences between intercultural, international, and intergroup communication, and why identity and identity politics plays such an important role when people from different cultural backgrounds communicate and try to get their messages across. We also discuss how media shape our perceptions of cultures and identities, and as a bonus, you will learn how a sombrero unexpectedly helped launch John's career as a communication scholar. So, leave your biases and prejudices at the door for the next hour. Make yourself comfortable, go for a walk or a run, or whatever you feel like doing right now. And join us as we explore John's world of cultures, communication, but also music. Enjoy! Hi John, welcome to the Community Lab. Thanks for joining the pod.
It's great to be here.
Awesome. I love to hear this. John, before we start talking about your research, especially on intercultural communication, as always, I hand over to my co-host, the new co-host, co-pilot, who will introduce you to the audience.
John R. Baldwin is a professor of communication at Illinois State University, where he has been teaching and researching since the mid-1990s. His work focuses on intercultural and intergroup communication, with particular attention to culture, identity, prejudice, and how people make sense of difference in everyday interaction. Across his career, Professor Baldwin has consistently worked at the intersection of theory and lived experience, often drawing on qualitative approaches to understand how culture is communicatively constructed. He is the co-author and editor of several influential books, including Redefining Culture and Intercultural Communication for Everyday Life. And his work has appeared in leading journals such as Human Communication Research and the International Journal of Intercultural Relations. According to Google Scholar, his publications have been cited about 3,000 times, reflecting the enduring relevance of his contributions to the field. Professor Baldwin is also widely known as a dedicated educator and mentor, shaping generations of students and scholars in intercultural communication and communication theory. Co-pilot thinks that Professor Baldwin represents the kind of scholar whose work reminds us that intercultural communication is not just about cultures out there, but about how we listen, relate, and reflect in everyday encounters, making his research both intellectually rigorous and deeply humane.
All right. That was Mr. Copilot.
I like Mr. Copilot. I'd like to meet them.
Yeah, okay, great. I think you can do that, I think. So what do you think of his performance?
I like that. It sounds very, very endearing. I especially like working with students. And if anything, lately I worked with a lot of master's students. As I think I've chaired over 200, chaired or been on over 200 master's thesis committees.
Wow.
And I work with, we don't have a doctoral program in my school, so I love mentoring master's students in their research. Mm-hmm. But I like that. I think it seems fair.
Seems fair. So is there anything wrong or outdated, or would you like to add something?
Boy, the 3,000. I didn't know I've been cited that many times. I never look at it. Yeah, cool.
No vanity here.
No vanity. So, no, I think that sounds good.
Okay, cool. Good. Then before we talk about our main topic today, intercultural communication, I would love to start with your story. How did you find your way into communication as a field, first and foremost, in a first step? And in a second step, why did you become interested in intercultural communication per se? But let's start with why communication in the first place.
I might need to reverse the order of the questions.
Okay, no problem.
For reasons that you'll see. So I think it all comes back to, I say it comes back to when I was in the first grade and my brother was in the third grade. And I have to know this is the 1960s, politically incorrect era. And in his class in the third grade, they were teaching Spanish and they had a Spanish party and he got to wear a sombrero. Mm-hmm. And I didn't. Because I wasn't in the class and I was jealous and I wanted to study languages, but then we moved and unfortunately they do not teach languages in most American schools at the primary level as when they most need it. Mm-hmm. So it was a few years before I could take Spanish. So I took Spanish, maxed out my school Spanish program. I took a year of German. I went to college, studied Spanish and French. Then I learned Portuguese and went to Brazil. Mm-hmm. I just keep studying languages and I fell in love with language and culture. Specifically Latin American cultures. I'm a Latin Americanist.
Okay.
I actually served for 2 years as an evangelical missionary in Brazil and then came back and I was looking for what to do with my life. Mm-hmm. So I was talking to someone. I wanted to go into international sales and this very kind person from a clothier called Jansen Incorporated met with me and he talked with me for an hour. He says, we don't have any jobs, but let me talk to you about your career. And we got all done. He said, yeah, I just don't think international sales is for you. He says, you're a person who likes to give, but sales is always about taking.
Yeah.
Unless you really, really believe in your product. He says, have you ever thought of teaching? Mm-hmm. I thought, teaching? No, I don't want to do that. And several other things just suggested that I should go into teaching. So even leaving my master's program, I was looking for a master's, but we wanted a master's where we could go abroad and work for a few years, doing something abroad for a few years, and then come back. And those years abroad would facilitate my field rather than work against it. Mm-hmm. And what I found, so I'm interested first in culture. Then the field I found was called intercultural communication.
Okay.
So my undergraduate was not in communication. My master's was my first communication degree. Mm-hmm. Got done with my master's. Once again, I'm looking for work as a consultant, working for a big business. But even by this time, I was growing suspicious of big businesses, and I didn't really trust them to have the people's best interest in at heart. Mm-hmm. So I was going to do consulting, and some agencies said, yeah, you can consult for us. What's your first job? I said, I was hoping this would be it. They said, no, our consultants are contracted, but they all have a real job on the side, like being a professor.
Okay. Interesting.
Professor again. So basically, out of my master's, I decided to go and become a professor, got my doctorate. Mm-hmm. This is my first job at Illinois State, and I've been here over 30 years.
Congrats.
So that's how I got into culture and communication. I got into communication because it's a way to study culture, and then since then, it's become my home.
That's a fascinating story.
It all starts with a sombrero.
Yeah, it all started with a sombrero. It's fascinating. That's pretty cool. It's a cool story. I love it. Okay, good. Then what I also would like to know from my guests always is, because we have like these two hearts beating in our chest, we are a scholar, a communication scholar, but also like private people.
Yeah.
when you think of communication and how you approach it, right? Is there a difference between how you do this as a scholar, as a professor, or as a private person?
That is a tough question, and I probably don't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are times because part of what I do is I look at diversity in media and groups in media, and it's really hard to watch. I loved the show Castle several years ago, even though at the time I knew that there were some sexist tropes where the non-specialist comes in and helps the savvy police officer solve her crimes. And I have to turn off my feminist side to be able to watch some TV and enjoy it.
Okay.
But at the same time, I can't watch a movie or a TV show without analyzing it and without thinking, what are the underlying ideas? In the same way, when I communicate with my children or when I communicate with my wife, at some level, the things that I study during my work time come and inform how I interact with my children, how I interact with my neighbors. I teach qualitative research, which a lot is about asking questions and in-depth interviews. And sure enough, when I'm meeting someone on the bus and I want to talk, I can engage them and follow up with their questions from tools from my class. So for me, the line is somewhat thin. If I'm an activist in the classroom as I'm teaching, I should be an activist in my everyday life. If I want to be competent interculturally in the classroom because I work with students from different cultures, then when I go to my doctor's office, I should carry those same skills with me. When I'm working with a cashier at the grocery store, I should see that this is a person with a culture and a background which is important to them. And they might interact differently with me than I'm expecting to, and that's okay. So for me, it's one and the same, to be honest.
When you think of culture from a communication perspective, let's say because it's a communication podcast, right? What does culture actually mean? And also when we talk about intercultural communication, how does this type of communication differ from, let's say, international or intergroup communication? Please enlighten us.
Sure. Let's start with the notion of culture. And culture. So culture is a very difficult idea to define. And I like to say, like any words we have, it's a word that's made up, and we fill the word with meaning based on where we're from and what our discipline is, and what when we're writing and what country we're from. So a few years ago, some colleagues and I gathered 313 definitions from different cultures, from different disciplines. We had writers from 6 different disciplines contribute a chapter on how their discipline used the notion of culture. I'm going to say the audience can't hear my air quotes around the word culture, air quote, culture. So culture basically we like to say it's an empty vessel. The word is a vessel that we fill with meaning. I would say one thing that holds all meanings of culture together, it is something shared with a group. That group could be as small as a family. So we have a family culture, and that's why we have people from 2 different families who address illness or holidays differently. And they get in fights over it because it's really a cultural difference. We have cultures between neighborhoods, and we have cultures at the national and even regional level. So there are different levels of culture. What makes it specifically communicative is the way of life of a group of people, including symbols, values, behaviors, artifacts, and other shared aspects. That is, there are things like values, what we hold to be important, but we only know it's important because our parents and teachers and rabbis have told it to us and made it important. And because media tells us it's important. So media influences our culture. The jokes we tell in the locker room influence our culture. Our friends tell us what's important. They reward some things and not other things. So we learn how to act like a man or a woman or an American or a Democrat or a Christian Democrat in Germany or whatever. So we learn how to act in these roles through communication. But because of that, I think another aspect we have to consider is that some people treat culture as related to power differences, because part of what wants to influence culture are our advertisers. The beauty industry makes billions of dollars convincing us that we're insufficient. To propose a view, a standard of what is really beautiful that requires plastic surgery and lots of makeup and this and that. Why? Because it serves specific interests. And in many of our countries right now, including the United States and beyond, we have people fighting to define what constitutes a family. by defining when does life begin, which is a cultural belief. So we have all these debates, and the debates are now wrapped up with power systems, because if I can write the books, and the books are part of what spreads the culture, if I can control the books, I can control the culture. So now suddenly it's not just us sharing the ideas with our friends in the neighborhood, but we have industries, governments, media systems that promote different views that become part of our culture. It's an ever-shifting things.
Yeah.
So because of that, culture itself is hard to define. And because culture is hard to define, it's hard to know what intercultural communication is.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
In the same way, many different authors say the very easy definition is to say it's when people from two different nations communicate. No, you've been in Canada.
Yeah.
And a Canadian and American communicate, and the culture may not come to play in the event. They might be so similar that culture is not irrelevant.
Yeah.
But then I'm from a town and I'm communicating with someone from the farmland, and they can see the life quite differently than I do. So what we want to say is, I would say that first, culture is shared. Communication is intercultural, is whenever the aspects of thoughts and values that I share from the group that I brought up with get in the way or impact my communication with you, because you come from a different set of experiences and messages. So it's intercultural whenever culture influences the sending or receiving of messages between two people.
Yeah.
International communication is often treated the same way, and depending on who you're reading, it's the same thing. And some people say international, intercultural, it's all the same thing. Some writers treat international communication to look at media systems. So now we're going to say, what is the news like when the news is state-sponsored, as in some European countries, as opposed to advertiser-sponsored, as in the U.S.? And how do those systems shape the media and how news is told and what is portrayed and what game shows look like? So now media systems, international communication, for some people is media systems. For some people, it's intercultural communication. But the main issue is, for me, is that more and more culture is not the same thing as nation.
Yeah.
International communication might be, you're from one country, I'm from another country, we're talking. But intercultural communication says, you and I live in the same city. We're both from Lagos, Nigeria, and you're from one tribe and I'm from a different tribe, or you're from the farm and I'm... So suddenly within Lagos, Nigeria, there are a bunch of different cultures. And at my university, there are a bunch of different cultures. And I'm here at the home of State Farm Insurance in Bloomington, Normal, Illinois, a big insurance company. And each unit will have its own culture with a little c, though that's impacted by larger levels of culture.
Okay.
Intergroup communication is different. And in the textbooks that you had a chance to look at, I distinguish between intercultural and intergroup, and that's this. Intergroup is when we see ourselves in terms of groups. This comes from a theory called social identity theory. Social identity theory says that we cannot not think of ourselves as group member. Like, I grow up thinking of myself as a member of a group.
Yeah.
And what happens is I now begin to see in groups and out groups. So you're an immigrant and I'm a national, or you're a Democrat and I'm a Republican if you're in the United States. Or you're a rich person, I'm a poor person, or you're black and I'm white. So we begin to draw these differences. Very often I will interact with a person of color, an African American. And if I look at values, beliefs, worldview, they and I are the same. We are not culturally different.
Yeah.
But if I'm seeing that person as a black person and not just as a person, and I'm treating that, and suddenly prejudice and stereotypes are coming to play, I'm not interacting with that person based on their culture. I'm interacting with that person based on my belief about their group.
Makes perfect sense.
So realistically, a model of communication says we have to consider a couple things. If I'm talking with Danny, the first thing we have is individual differences based on our upbringing and our mood of the moment. But the second thing is you have where you grew up, not just the country, but the cultures you grew up in, the cultures, plural, I grew up in. But then further, if I see you as a European, if that group identity is in my mind and that impacts, then now it becomes intergroup communication. And sometimes it can be both at the same time.
Okay.
So what we're dealing with for me is the difference between real differences in values and beliefs and ways of living and perceived differences that are based on prejudice and stereotypes.
Perfect answer. I think now I have to switch the orders of my questions I have prepared because that fits a bit better. Because you already mentioned it, it's a lot about identity, right?
Yeah.
And you already mentioned social identity theory, where it's mostly about categorization, so like in-group, out-group.
Yes.
I think you mentioned it already, this notion of othering, right? And in your book, you also mentioned it that especially in interactions, multiple identities come to the fore or surface, right, where we interact. So can you unpack this whole notion a little bit for us?
Yeah, let's start off with the notion of identity itself. So identity basically is when you see yourself as part of a group, and identity scholars are going to say that your identity includes a variety of things. First of all, is just my groupness. So I'll use one of my identities. Certainly, I'm a professor, and my being a professor as an identity. When I think of myself as a professor, there are certain expectations and ideas that come with what a professor should do or should be like, which, by the way, we learn through communication.
Yeah.
So we have these ideas of what a professor is. In a lot of university systems, you have tenure line professors who are hired and assumed to be permanent unless they do something really, really bad. But you also have the non-tenure track who are the temporary hires.
Yeah.
And in many universities in the United States, there's a status thing going on, and status is about identity. Where suddenly, I've talked to people who are staff, they're supportive staff, administrative staff, and they say, some of the professors treat us like crap. They look right through me. They don't see me as a person. Why? Because very often we're seeing this identity at play. So these identities come to play, but what happens is, I'm a professor, but I'm also a male. I'm also a white. I'm also American. I also have my faith identity and a variety of identities. Most of those, all of us have multiple identities, and most of those sit in the background of our minds until a need arises. So we're talking, and someone makes a joke at my expense about some aspect, or now because I'm getting older, someone says, "Oh, I went to a restaurant. I did not ask, but they offered me a senior discount without me asking." And now I'm thinking suddenly, my age identity, for the most part, when I go to the gym, I work out, my age identity is in the background. I don't care. I don't think about it. I go swimming, whatever. But then when I go and someone offers me a senior discount, boom, that senior identity comes to the front. One writer, Michael Hecht, would say becomes salient. And now we need to negotiate that before we can get back into interaction again. But we also communicatively create identities. So in the United States, you have Latinos or Latin Americans or Mexican Americans or Chicanos. Each group is different. The label that we choose relates to how the person sees the identity. Some identities, one label says I'm more political about my identity. Another one says I'm more assimilationist about my identity. I want to be a Mexican American, not Latinx. So the label has something to do with the identity. And some people have identities that are central. So, for example, if you hold an identity and it's right there in the front, it's never in the front all the time. But if it's there most of the time, this might be like someone who's very, very strongly feminist, and they see feminism in every circle and every opportunity they are, then that identity has a centrality to them, and it's going to be there more of the time. So these identities lead us to think in terms of in-groups and out-groups. And if anything, I'm going to move easily into one of your questions that deals with identity politics. I was listening to a podcast the other day about anger and rage in the United States, but probably applies across cultures, that we're becoming angrier. It says we read the news and we get angry. And one of the speakers says something that resonated. They said, first of all, politics is driven by fear. If I want voters, I want people to be afraid. But I want them to, but it's easiest to get a block of voters if I can make people afraid of them, whoever them is. And basically, and we've done this throughout the history of politics. Politics has always been about us versus them. So with intergroup communication, I'm going to do a few things. First of all, I want to paint them as a holistic, homogenous group. They are all alike. We are very different. We are complex. they are simple. We are educated. They are dumb or retarded or ignorant or whatever.
Yeah.
So we have these views of the other. Sometimes we even exalted that to a demonization. One writer calls it delegitimation. Let's start using animal terms. And we saw this in the Rwanda genocide of 1994, where one side is calling the other side cockroaches, because then that gives us a reason to exterminate them, like Hitler.
Wow.
And this is exactly what Hitler does. Hitler creates groups. We find a scapegoat for the problems. And the scapegoat is always them, so you vote for us.
Mm-hmm.
Identity politics, for me, deals a lot with with trying to regulate. First of all, we want to regulate what culture is. So right now in the United States, there's an effort where people want to keep out immigrants because they don't want, quote, them messing with, quote, our culture, even though our culture is made up of immigrant groups eventually.
Yeah, that's true.
So what happens is we create these barriers, and I want to preserve my identity. I want my identity, whatever that is, to rise to the top, to have more status. As Max Weber, a sociologist, would say, we're negotiating for status so that my group can name what good art is.
Mm-hmm.
My group can name how you should raise your family. My group names who you should marry or be able to marry, and whether you can divorce. So I want my group to have that social power. So a part of my group having that social power is to find a way to put down the other group so that they are disenfranchised. Now, what this looks like in real life is you'll see, and I think we see this in multiple countries right now, we see certainly there's a right-wing trend in Italy and Germany and France and Spain and
Austria
Chile.
as well.
Austria. So there's a lot of right wing. A lot of this deals with the reality of immigration, which is a difficult reality to face. Some of it is a cultural preservation in many countries. One writer writes a book called "There Ain't No Black in the Union Jack," meaning that to be British is to be white. So we create identities that are wrapped in whiteness or power, and we don't want other groups to name the norms for identity. So identity politics is all about naming who can be what. And one of the ways to do this is by silencing the identities of other people. So that changing the history books. So one state in the United States has basically actually a couple states have done this, where the state of Utah, you cannot discuss race or racism in the high school level, because that's for the parents to teach their children about at home, as we know they will. And the state of Texas passed a law where the Civil War was not fought about slavery; it was fought about state rights.
Of course. What else?
So if we can change the textbooks and raise the children reading a certain textbooks that paints identity a certain way, then people of certain groups lose their voice and lose their image. So identity politics, including the idea of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, rises to the level to where, unfortunately, some people read DEI as quotas, which is misreading. A DEI is not about quotas and making sure 25% of the job goes to a group. It's about saying we want to be sure to identify the strengths of groups, because if society consistently ignores the strengths of your group, then people from the group feel badly about themselves. They don't see themselves in the media. They don't see themselves in the pictures of the heroes on the wall of the administration. One of our local schools in my town, the high school, had all those success posters, and a friend of mine who was a Latina went to the principal and she said, do you realize that every single child and every single poster in your high school is white? And he said, we don't play racial politics here.
We're colorblind.
We're colorblind.
It's the classic.
So suddenly, identity politics and ideology. Ideology says all of us have a set of ideas about the world and about ourselves and about other people. All of us have these ideas. It's not that ideology, we can't see the other side has ideology and we don't. All of us have a set of ideas. What we want to recognize is the maneuvers or moves that people make from both sides or multiple sides. In Europe, usually it's coalition politics. So multiple sides and voices, or the media, what is the vision of ideology that they are framing through the media, through the policy, And what does that say about the dignity of individuals in the group?
Yeah.
So we would say racism or sexism or heterosexism is not based on the intent, it's based on the effect. And if the effect of incorporating a policy that removes all images of people of color from a particular museum, then what happens is we're saying this identity really has no value. And people don't see themselves, which then works against the self-esteem, because how I see myself, how I see my group impacts how I see myself.
Yeah.
So ideally we should be about, I would say, elevating voices from different people, not in a way that's performative, not posting something on my Instagram on Martin Luther King Jr. Day that says, hey, look, I'm liberal, but in a way that says, let me hear people's voices, let me promote people's voices in a way that gives dignity to all individuals.
I'm not 100% sure if you touched upon it, but I think is the concept of symbolic annihilation.
Yeah.
Could you unpack what you mean by it?
Yeah.
And maybe also explain it, because in your book that I read, or the few chapters I read, you came up with examples like movies like Kill Bill or The Last Samurai. So can you unpack this a little bit and explain what you mean by that?
Certainly. Symbolic annihilation surprisingly comes from George Gerbner. He coined this term in 1976. George Gerbner is a guy who came up with a thing called cultivation theory, which now is a very commonly used quantitative approaches where to analyze the media and look at representations. Gerbner was interested a lot in violence in the media and how media provides a very violent view of the world, which he believed led us to believe that the world is, quote, a mean and scary place, called the cultivation effect. But Gerbner also said that very often when you watch the media, and we realize this, we're watching some crime show and an older adult is introduced and we know that they're the next victim. So basically, what he said is, in violence in the media, certain people are more likely to have, I think he calls it symbolic vulnerability, to say they're more likely to be the targets. But then symbolic annihilation is the idea that there's an absence. It could be either absence or a marginalization or misrepresentation of a particular group in a media, and I would say within a society. So I don't want to use, I've used a lot of U.S. examples, but I want to use broader examples. I want to talk about Indian media, specifically Indian media under Modi, where suddenly Indian media becomes very nationalistic. We're doing a lot of pro-nationalistic stuff. But then in the media, how does Indian media represent Pashtuns, or how does it represent people from, specifically from Pakistan or from Bangladesh? To say they're represented in these monolithic terms as if they are all alike. I'm thinking intergroup communication, or they're simply absent. What we find in the United States is that there's a stronger. Originally, there was a narrow and a negative representation of African Americans, and that still continues, especially on main networks. But there are a lot of Netflix series and a lot of shows that give broader, greater depth to African Americans in U.S. media. So the media landscape is changing. At the same time, sometimes the text will show a group and they're representing the group, but the group only has success when they adopt the mainstream way of thinking. I'm going to go back to the original Star Trek, which no one of our audience will remember, the William Shatner version.
I can't remember.
So you have this great homogenous culture, and you have people from all different. You have an African-American woman, you have Asian and a Russian, and they all have this nice unified culture, which, by the way, is very white American.
Yeah.
In the new version of the book, one of our writers talks about crazy rich Americans, and she says that basically the crazy rich Americans become, they make do by adopting the American way, I want to say the white, mainstream, middle-class American way of life, so that the cultures of origin are sort of lost, they're annihilated, they're erased.
Yeah.
So symbolic annihilation deals with the erasure of a group through mere absence or limited representation. Gerbner says that it sort of erases their social significance. We don't realize that, just for example, people in wheelchairs have a real full, rich life. They're introduced in a movie. A person with a physical disability is introduced into a show only to serve the point of the disability becoming a plot point.
Yeah.
So suddenly there is a symbolic annihilation of people with physical disabilities in our media. They're treated as insignificant. And if I grow up with a disability, I don't see people with a disability becoming the chairperson or the president or this role. They're in limited roles.
Yeah.
And because that's a representation of my group, because I'm drawing meaning from my group, from the media, it leads me to have a negative view of myself. So that'd be symbolic annihilation. Again, I think we do this in all cultures. A lot of times I think it's not deliberate. I want to really, really focus on this. A lot of media studies has moved to look at the effects of the media, not the intent of the media. So if we're having beer commercials that sexualize women, maybe they're just trying to sell the beer. I don't know what's in the producer's heads. It's not my job to judge what's in their heads. I want to look at the image.
Yeah.
And I want to say, do the images have impact on people? The research is very mixed, and let's be honest. For media scholars, cultivation research shows a small. The writers say small but important effects. But there is research that says that the media that we use, I would say, is today, especially social media, what's in my information silo as I get news from my people, will lead me to think about Middle Easterners or Muslims or Jewish people, etc., a very specific and limited way. And for people of those groups, they need to find new media outlets that show a better, fuller representation of them.
That's a good point. We will talk a bit more about the practical applications of intercultural communication, your research, your teaching, how we can apply that in professional contexts. But first, I want to quickly ask, because you described them in your book, I think it was 5, several motives why intercultural communication matters. So things like personal growth, social responsibility, economic factors, travel, and media. Could you walk us through those motives and why they're still important in this highly connected world?
Absolutely. And I really want to start with the most obvious for a lot of our listeners are going to be business people or students who want a job. So I want to start with the business end and say that the business end deals with a couple things. One of these is education, and one of these deals with businesses. So I was looking up some updated statistics, and one website says that currently around the world, there are 6.9 million international students.
That's quite a bit.
I was wondering, because my wife and I just came back from a little trip to Portugal. I'm wondering how many tourists. Now, I'm not dividing between international tourists and tourists within a country, because I believe that culture is not nation, and that if I'm going to a different end of my country, or from urban to rural or rural to urban, it's still intercultural. It says that in the given year, there are 1.52 billion tourists.
Wow.
What I did not look up is the number of people who are involved in international business. How much of our countries are supported by economy. So now I see people who say, we want to buy locally, we want to buy within our country. And I say, well, that's okay. Do you want to only sell in your country? Because if we only sold in our country, we would all go broke.
Yeah, I agree.
So our world is a very multicultural. We meet people all the time in our doctor's offices, in our businesses, in the classroom from around the world. So that's sort of the economic motive. And that also crosses the cross-cultural travel motive that many of us, well, probably all of us, will cross cultural lines in our lives. I can't imagine when you don't cross a cultural line, even within your province of Canada, you're going to cross a cultural line. So we're all crossing cultural lines, and most of us will probably cross national lines at some point, because cross-cultural travel is easier, a little expensive right now, but it is still easy, very easy for most of us. It's very common for most people, especially in the European world. You're going to be traveling. Everyone has a passport. You're going to be traveling. And I think that is increasingly true around the world. So I want to go from the economic and the cross-cultural motives to say there's a social responsibility motive. So I was also looking up some other statistics, and according to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, at the end of July of last year, there were 117.3 million displaced people.
Wow. That's
displaced because of persecution, conflict, or violence. There is now a different number for those displaced for climate reasons, and that number is 250 million.
Wow.
So we have a lot of people who are being displaced. That is to say, immigration, refugees are an issue, but so are things right now. I just saw in the news that a new Ebola virus has come up. A very dangerous virus that will eventually spread outside of the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We need multinational teams to solve problems. We need scientists around the world to talk to each other. Even within our communities, there are issues facing our communities that need people to work together. So the whole idea of social responsibility says we need to be aware of our surroundings, and we are working with people from different groups to solve it. Often, on the first day of different classes that I teach, because our students in the United States, students are very practical, and they always want to say, how will this apply in the job? What are the job skills I'm going to learn this class? And yes, my classes are going to have some job skills. There's going to be stuff that applies, but I'll usually start the first day and say, my job, I'm an old-fashioned educator, and my job here is not to teach you job skills and to make you a better employee or manager. Now, that might happen. My job is to make you a better citizen.
Fully agree.
And especially in intercultural, we are world citizens, and being a world citizen says I need to be concerned about the conflict I'm trying to think, in the Sudan, the conflict in the Sudan or in the Ukraine or in Palestine. I need to be concerned about these issues. But part of my concern says I need to understand the issue from the point of view of the people involved in it and not bring an outside perspective in to solve your problems. I want to end with the personal growth motive. And I want to speak personally from this perspective.
Please do so,
because it also deals with international travel. And this is the issue. It's a blessing and a curse. When you go abroad, but especially when you live abroad and learn a new way of living, you learn, one writer, Yang Yan Kim, says you gain a new set of thoughts, believings, and behaviors. And what happens is she says you actually become a different person in ways. But that assumes that I'm going to go to your culture. I'm going to go to Sweden. Denmark. I'm going to go to Denmark and make sure I have the right countries here. I'm going to go to Denmark. It assumes I'm going to go to Denmark and learn and be Danish. But realistically, that's not what happens in adjustment. I learn parts and bits and pieces of Danish culture and Danish views of family and neighborliness and work-life balance and all this.
Yeah, exactly.
So I learned those, but more and more researchers on adjustment are saying I don't simply adopt the culture. I make choices.
That's right, too.
And this is what I like. The personal growth motive said that because I've lived in Latin America and spent a lot of time in Latin Americans where we know the Spanish word or the Portuguese word for friend is amigo. But who I call amigo and what that means is not the same thing as in the United States. The word has a very deep meaning. Which is different often for people who grow up around the same people their whole lives instead of moving every 3 years. Suddenly I begin to see things like family and friendship and success differently if I'm in a different country. What I like to say is a personal growth motive is learning about other cultures gives me choice. That is, I have to realize there's more than one notion of beauty. There's more than one notion of what democracy means. And then I can make the choice, and I might still choose my own. And I might still say, I'm pretty cool with my country's version of democracy, and let's stick with that for my country. But seeing it allows me to appreciate it from other people or to have the choice to change the way I see success or friendship or time. And in Latin America, time is different. And I would say it's different and beautiful to say that you and I are having this moment, this relationship, and that's more important. I don't think either you or I are watching the time. Why? Because we have editing to do later.
Yeah.
But suddenly we live in this moment, and this relationship is more important than the time on the watch. And there's a certain beauty in that. It doesn't work all the time in all the places.
Yeah.
But I can only realize that when I've been there and experienced it. So culture gives me personal growth and choice. So I like the choice that learning other cultures gives me.
Since you told me that you listened to a few episodes, and I'm very grateful for it, you probably know that we have two target audiences here. The communication professionals, so like people working in public relations, corporate communication, internal communication, you name it. And the other target groups consists of like people in leadership positions, from a shift manager to a middle manager to a CEO. When you think of these two groups, what advice would you give them when it comes to intercultural communication? What to consider in their daily lives?
Sure. So for professionals, I'm thinking of a few things. And I've done cultural training, like consulting before. And this is what I would tell someone if I'm working with an engineer who's going to go work abroad in another culture. I would say usually what you want to learn is, one writer calls it, Harrison Rand, you talk about what's culture general concepts. So what I would say is begin reading and read on things such as, I'm going to call it intercultural competence, cross-cultural adaptation, and cultural values and differences between cultures. I'm dealing with students who may or may not travel abroad. And I might use Indonesia as an example. We might study something from Indonesia, and they're never going to go to Indonesia. I'm saying, yeah, I know you're not going to go to Indonesia. I want you to notice the ways in which argumentation can differ from one culture to another.
Yeah.
The way that some cultures can be quite direct, some cultures can be quite indirect. All we're trying to learn is that the types of ways that cultures can differ. So I think what the work professional can do is train yourself to see the types of ways that things can differ. But then the other thing I would say is, as you're interacting with, you realize, I say culture general, you start cultural general as cultures in general. What is adjustment like? What is culture like? Then you want to read culture specifically, and that is, in this case, I have a lot of students currently who are from Ghana and Nigeria. So in my classes, suddenly my PowerPoint slides must change. And one day we're having some concept in class, and I have a picture of the Nigerian president in my slide. I do not say anything about it.
Okay.
It illustrates the slide, but I just move on. At the end of the year, my students said, I felt so included in your class because you included us in your PowerPoint presentations. But also, because I have more students from Ghana and Nigeria, I can do some culture-specific learning. So now first I'm going to say, number one, culture general learning. Number two, culture-specific learning. If you have employees from a specific area, or you're working and going to go working in Brazil, read on Brazilian culture, which says, how is Brazil different from your culture? You will read, as you're looking out there are a lot of frameworks like individualism and collectivism that you will see. And it's good to know those and to realize Brazil is more collectivist than the United States. As long as you realize that there's a lot of difference and complexity within Brazil, and in some ways it's quite individualistic, and in some ways it's quite collectivistic. Instead, eventually I want to understand Brazil of its own right by reading Brazilian authors. So I'm going to say, read widely, and when possible, read stuff from people from the group you're working with. We've been applying this to culture, but let us say now that you're in a multi-ethnic organization, and you have people from different regions of the country or different racial groups or an immigrant group in your culture. So now I would also start reading stuff from the groups that you're not familiar with. So the one thing we lack in the United States is we have the George Floyd killing, and a lot of people want to read stuff about racism. There's a wonderful book called White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. which is really written for whites, about whites, to whites, but it doesn't give me the African-American perspective. Because I live and work and have neighbors who are African-American, I should be reading something from African-American authors or indigenous authors. So I want to read widely. So one of the books I would recommend is it's called Our Voices. It's an older book, but it's got a bunch of different chapters, and each chapter is written by someone from the group itself, not from an outsider.
Okay.
So the first thing, culture general. Second thing, culture specific. So the third thing is I'm going to say, now that I know all about, quote, I know everything about Brazilian culture because I read a book on it, I should not assume that the person I'm dealing with will reflect that culture.
Makes sense.
Because the thing I must remember is that people are not cultures. The very fact that you've come to Norway or Germany or Holland to work already says you may not be like every other Brazilian.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I don't know how long you've been in the country. So really what it does is it helps me know what might explain your behavior. But in the end, I'm going to use the same communication skills that I would use with someone from my own culture to say, let me learn how to listen. Let me hear your story. Let me hear your background, your family background, whatever. So I want to try to see things from your perspective, from your lenses, which probably are influenced by your culture, but I can't assume the culture is the person.
I agree.
Because of that, if I have a single employee from Brazil, I may not do a lot of reading on Brazilian culture. I'm just going to deal with that person as an individual, but I know the culture general stuff, and I realize your behavior in this situation is probably influenced by your culture, just like mine is. But if I have a lot of people from a region or a country, I'm going to read about that region. I should know about it.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So those would be some of my main suggestions. The other thing I would say is in the organization, very often in some countries, we want to celebrate diversity. So let's talk about women. We want to celebrate women's diversity by having Women's History Month. Does that mean that the other 11 we're focusing on men?
Yeah, this is a classic question. Yeah,
classic question. So what I would probably say is, I would say make awareness of difference, and we won't use the word diversity because it's kind of politically loaded, but be aware of individual difference and identities and make it a part of your very mindset to say, I'm going to continue to elevate women in a workplace and make sure they have a voice. If I'm in a small group, and this is a common occurrence, where a woman says something in an organizational small group that is not heard until a man says the same thing. So if a woman says something and a man says the same thing, I'm going to say, oh, that's just like Julie said a couple minutes ago. So I'm going to try to, and I don't want to give voice. I don't want to speak for Julie, but I want to make sure that Julie has a voice and that people have voices in the organization. And then the last thing I would say, something I've had to learn is because I'm teaching culture. I'm teaching culture as a white middle-class male, and I realize that. And there was a time I used a phrase in class that I did not realize had sexist assumptions. It's just a phrase from the marketplace that we use. And after class, a very kind student called me aside and she said, let me talk to you about the background of that word and what it means. Instead of getting defensive and say, I'm not sexist. No, I would say, no, all of us have sexism. We cannot watch Western media without being sexist. Instead, I said, thank you for making me aware of that. I appreciate your openness. So I think as leaders, we need to be, to open ourselves, to be vulnerable, to make mistakes, and to let people, to create an environment where someone can come up and say, when you say this does not respect how I see myself. And I can listen and say, tell me more about how we could respect that.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, John. That's very insightful, theoretically, but also practically. Before we start wrapping up this episode, I have a quick question regarding your research agenda.
Yes.
I'm curious. So what's currently on your agenda, and what are you most excited also to do, let's say, in the next 1 or 2 years? So because you said you're going to retire in 2 years-ish, right? So
very likely, yeah.
So what do you want to do until then?
So I'm working on a couple of projects right now. One of them is with some colleagues here, and that is we're specifically looking at second-generation Africans within the United States and looking at issues of acculturation and choice. What choices do they make to accept or to use the culture from their parents' homeland versus the United States, and the different ways, the different choices that people make. but also we're looking at using a thing called co-cultural theory to look at negative messages that second-generation Africans receive from dominant U.S. cultures and how they respond to those messages. So that's my current sort of United States-based study. And then I've just finished a sabbatical where I've been working and developing connections with Brazilian colleagues from several places in Brazil, and we're looking at two different things. One of these is microaggressions in Brazil. We realize that race is constructed differently in every nation, and race in Brazil is not treated the same way as race in the United States.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And because of that, and also because of the very high amount of miscegenation in Brazil, race is much less categorical. In the United States, we supposedly want to define your race by one drop of African-American blood, a very racist assumption. In Brazil, there's a lot more miscegenation, and people don't always know who their ancestors are. So race is based on color, and so is racism. It's a sort of a sense of colorism. But often it's confused even more than the United States with classism. So I'm looking at microaggressions, class and racial microaggressions in Brazil. And then because I just love music, several of us are looking at music during the dictatorship era. It's protest music. And part of it is how do we negotiate protest against dictatorships through music, and how do the authors avoid or work through the censorship and sometimes exiling. But at the same time, we're also looking at how writers negotiate national, racial, and other identities in Brazilian music. Specifically, right now, we're studying an artist named Milton Nascimento.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar. I'm sorry.
Yeah, most people aren't, but he's like the Elton John of Brazil. He's been around. He has 50 albums, and he's very, very famous, but he's also very unique. And also, like Elton John just did his retirement tour. So we're analyzing different aspects of his music, but specifically we're looking at racial identities and national identities, and how we negotiate, how we use popular music to negotiate identity.
Wow, pretty cool.
Yes.
What's your plan after you're retired? So do you still want to do some research, or is it like I go fishing, or?
Yeah, I'm not much of a fisher. I do like to travel.
Okay.
We still travel a lot, and I'm always studying a language. So anytime you ask me, I'm studying at least one language.
Okay. What's it right now?
Well, right now I'm studying French, though during my sabbatical, I took a conversational Spanish class while I was reading in Portuguese.
Oh, okay. Parfait. C'est parfait. Ouais.
But really, if anything, one of the reasons I want to retire is I want to have a period of about 3 to 4 years just to write. I want to get a couple of edited books out. One of them is going to be on communicating racism, a reedition of Michael Hecht's 1998 book, and have different writers from different parts of the world talk about not just racism, but prejudice. So more broadly, prejudice, and what is prejudice in Northern Ireland like, and what are the elements of that. So I'll like to get a writer from each of several different countries to write about the contours of the communication of prejudice within their context.
That's cool.
So it's a vision for a book. And then because I have enough scholars interested in this particular musician in Brazil, I want to do an edited book in Portuguese with a Brazilian publisher that is all about this particular artist.
Yeah, nice projects. I wish you all the best. I cross my fingers that everything will turn out the way you want it to turn out. So
thank you.
All right. So now we're at our last segment. This is the fun one.
Okay.
I mean, it's intended to be fun. So we will see.
All right.
So that means it's time for our quick fire round. 5 rapid questions, 5 spontaneous answers, and no overthinking allowed.
That will be challenging. Okay.
We will see. But are you ready to do this?
All right. Let's go.
The quick fire round.
Early bird or night owl, and when are you at your best?
Early bird, because my dog wakes me up at 4 every morning, and I usually do some reading in the morning, and I go to bed by 9 or 10 at night.
Okay, so are you really at your best at 4 a.m.?
I am at my best in the mid-morning, and I am dragging by the afternoon.
Okay, good. In Denmark, we would say you're an A-menneske. That means like early bird. I'm a B-menneske. I'm more of a night owl. But anyway, okay, 4 o'clock. Awesome. Question number 2. What's a common misconception about culture that you would love to get rid of?
That culture is the same thing as nation.
You mentioned it already. If you hadn't become an academic, what do you think would you be doing instead?
I would want to work in an organization where I'm doing training and development because I am a teacher in every area of my life. I want to teach, and I would want to teach employees and mentor employees for better groups. It probably would involve culture, but I think organizational training is beyond that to also deal with good group work and other issues. So I'd want to be an organizational trainer if I found an organization I believed in.
Yeah. You have to do that first, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Do you have a favorite place in the world that feels like a cultural home away from home?
For me, it is still Brazil because I lived there for 2 years. 1 year, I'd gone to a totally different city of Brazil. Porto Alegre, way in the south, is a small city of 450,000. And I'm walking in the street. As far as I know, there's nothing to see tourist-wise. It's not a tourist city. And I'm just walking in the street, and you have the little cafes, and you have the architecture and the structure. And I thought, I am just at home here. Yeah, I could live here. Beyond that, I'm sort of fond of Tuscany and the culture of Tuscany and Italy, but also of Portugal. So I would see myself in the Portugal, Spain, Italy part of Europe.
Okay, I see a pattern here.
There's a pattern here.
In one sentence, what makes intercultural communication so challenging? And in another sentence, how can we overcome the challenge?
I think what makes intercultural communication so challenging is becoming aware of our own biases as we interact with people who are from different groups or cultures. And more, I think the best way to overcome that is to find ways to where I'm listening to, watching media from people from those areas. So if I really should be watching movies made in Brazil or movies made in India or something like that. So I try to watch movies and read books from different authors from different regions, to read poetry because I want to hear people's stories. The best way to know someone is to hear their story. And hopefully I can read that and learn over time to set aside my biases.
That's a perfect final word, a perfect ending for this podcast episode, for this lab talk. I have to say thank you. So it's been such a wonderful talk, very insightful, very relevant, especially these days. As you know, we talked about it also off the record in our preparation talk. And yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for your time and for your insights. And yeah, good luck with the upcoming 1 to 2 years. Thank you so much, and hopefully talk soon.
It's been my pleasure.
That was the Lab Talk with John Baldwin. As usual, I hope you can take something away from this conversation. I, for one, learned that 313 different definitions of culture are about 300 too many for my taste. Beyond that, we learned that culture is not the same thing as a nation. Even a family has a culture, which makes perfect sense when you think about the Addams family. We also learned that intercultural communication emerges whenever cultural backgrounds influence an interaction. At the same time, people are not cultures. They are influenced by cultures, certainly, but human beings are far too complex to be reduced to a nation, a region, or a single cultural identity. Finally, John reminded us that intercultural competence is something we all need to develop. That means learning about culture in general, but also about specific cultures, especially when we live abroad, work internationally, or collaborate with stakeholders from different parts of the world. If you'd like to learn more about culture and intercultural communication, check out the 5 references in the show notes. As always, handpicked by my guest, John. Follow the Community Lab on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. And don't forget to leave a thumbs up or a 5-star rating. Nice comments are always welcome as well. They go a long way in helping us navigate the infamous algorithm jungle. You can also find us on LinkedIn. So connect with us, share your thoughts, and help us grow this wonderful community of communication aficionados. You can also send us an email at communitylab.podcast@gmail.com. Feel free to keep our inbox busy. That's it for now. The Community Lab is heading into a well-deserved summer break. Research papers don't write themselves, unfortunately. We'll be back in the fall with new lab talks once the conference season is over. Have a great summer, and don't forget, communication is everywhere. It's in what you say, what you don't, and sometimes even in the green swamp, also known as the crumbling reflecting pool. Great job, Donnie. Stay curious and keep the conversation alive.